right, adjusting this guy and we will get rolling in just a moment. There, that's better. Currently using a rubber band and tripod. All right. There we go. Got that thing out of the way. Indeed, whatever it takes. The story of COVID. Perfect. All right. And we got a sweet baby Jane to join. All right. Rock and roll. Perfect. Oh my gosh, Chris, that is the coolest thing. I'm looking at the chat right now as we're letting people join. In fact, Styles Chris is saying that he did his homework by watching IWFF film and read more about them, which is so awesome. Hey Laura, hey everybody joining. Baby Jane, you gonna cuddle or what's your plan? She never knows. All right, so we are locked and loaded, ready to go. There's a baby Jane. Say hi. I am super excited about tonight. Thank you everybody for joining, and hopefully we have some people join in later. And of course, the video will always be available on the Nature League YouTube site to watch later. I know that anglerfish definitely took your perch. Sorry there, baby girl. My name is Brit Garner, and I am a PhD student here at University of Montana. I also get to do a lot of science communication, and YouTube is one of the places I get to do that through Nature League. So those of you who know me through here, awesome, welcome, good to have you. This year I also got to be a part of a really special thing in Missoula, Montana, which is the International Wildlife Film Festival. I'm getting to do the education outreach for this year, and usually that means organizing a ton of different kids, kindergarten through 12th grade, to come and watch films and to do that content. But because we moved everything online, we, just like all other life on earth, decided to adapt and roll with the punches. And so we've kind of adapted to the situation and have everything online. So right now we are just a little bit past halfway through the 43rd annual IWFF, and it is not too late. You can still check out all of the different material and films. There are a ton that are streaming for free. And if you want to buy a pass to get access to extras, etc., the minimum is $5. So super doable. And I know that we would certainly appreciate. So yes, so we have Jerry in the chat right here, which is producer and a main player in making all this happen, the IWFF, including just being an incredible advocate for the creation of storytelling in the video format and for life on Earth. She was saying it was going to be the best, but I think that we're totally making the best out of it. One of the awesome things about having the online forum is the fact that we can gather here in this space. And so tonight, on account of gathering in our spaces, why not talk about one of the coolest species on Earth that itself is potentially affected and certainly potentially involved with the situation we are in right now with COVID-19, on top of just being an incredible example of life on Earth, again, adapting and rolling with the punches. Rolling, because we're talking about the pangolin. And one of the coolest things I've learned after kind of going through a lot of different material over the years, as this animal totally captured my heart and imagination, is actually looking at the name. So the name, the etymology. So etymology is kind of the history of and the almost like evolution of words, words and languages. So the etymology of the name pangolin comes from Malay and actually means roller. So thing that rolls. And that name makes a lot of sense if you even just look at a pangolin. Oh gosh, baby Jane is fighting with an anglerfish for. Yeah, no, that's yours. I'll take the anglerfish out. There you go. That's all you. Perfect. Peace restored in the kingdom. So etymology does rule. Um, so coral and oak here under that handle is actually Katie Schuler, and hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. Katie both produced, directed, and I'm sure did at least 1 million and 4 other different roles, making this film about pangolins, specifically about what's happening right now in Nigeria and how people on the ground there and locals in those communities are working to combat the trafficking that is occurring. And so she's here right now. We wanted to do some kind of a live feed, but you guys know I can barely even make the live stream work. So we figured let's not push our luck. However, Katie is here, and we're going to have her interact with us and be able to take your questions. So like, for example, Chris, you saw, which is awesome. And actually, Eric Lervold, that's a great, since we're talking about etymology and names. Katie, if anyone or anyone in the chat that happens to know or lives near there, what names do pangolins have in Africa? So the origin pangolin, that's from more, I believe, Asian etymological basis. But if anybody knows some names in that they're called in Africa, that would be awesome. And while we're waiting on that, I just wanted to mention, if you haven't seen it, the title of the film is Nigerians Fight to Save the World's Most Trafficked Mammal. Couple of things in that title that you get to explore in this short documentary. First of all, the idea of trafficking, and also the idea of the most trafficked. So a lot of times when you might think about a species that is trafficked, and by that we mean pieces or parts, either live or dead, whole or in bits, are transported, typically illegally. When we talk about illegal trafficking. Awesome. And Katie is saying that it has a lot of different names depending on the country. And a lot of that has to do with range. What we call different species, it can be the exact same species or like identical genetically, but it might have, 50 different names if it has a really large range. Scotch Queen, we will totally start by talking a little bit about that, just kind of what are these, right? When we talk about something being trafficked, we think a lot about these charismatic megafauna species. So the tiger, the elephant, rhinoceros, the ivory trade, big cats. All of these are legitimate topics to discuss, and these are species that are impacted. But incredibly, the most trafficked mammal, at least according to what we know, the best we know now, are pangolins. And that's for mammals, right? So I mean, you might get totally different answers for reptiles or for fish, but for mammals. But what's incredible about this mammal is that it doesn't really look like a mammal at all. It is so incredibly unique for so many different reasons. So if you haven't seen a pangolin before, first of all, you should totally check out Katie's film that I put the link in the description, and you can also check it out through the IWFF site. But you can also just do a quick Google search. And if your search comes up with what looks like a snake with a cute nose, your search engine is not off. It is totally dead on. They almost look like reptiles because they have, let's see, it's basically a Pokemon. That is so incredibly fair, Eric. So actually, Sandshrew, I think, always reminded me of a pangolin. I think I'm thinking of the right Pokemon. I do better with animals on Earth than I do Pokemon. but I will see how I did there. I think it's like sand shrew. That's like the closest one. Um, so pangolins actually have scales. They're the only scaled mammal, at least to our knowledge, right? I like to say that caveat. If you know me, you know that I like to leave space open to the fact that we simply don't know everything. There's a lot to still learn about life on Earth. So, to our knowledge, pangolins are the only scaled mammals. So, their skin actually has scales or covered in what looks like armor, and they almost kind of look like artichoke leaves. They come in different patterns. Scientists have actually looked at cross sections, so tiny microscopic patterns and put them on slide to see those really intricate patterns, and they've seen all kinds of shapes that were unique to them. These scales are made up of keratin, so it's like this guy, but if I was covered in my fingernails. And it's kind of the same thing that you have, like a rhinoceros horn, and other very hard structures that we see for life on Earth. But pangolins are just covered in them as these scales. Adorable pine cones is also very fair. And yep, exactly. So Katie's mentioning it right here. If you look at them, you pull up a picture. Besides thinking Pokemon, they do look a lot like anteaters. And if you also just kind of look at what we call morphology, so etymology, shape, and then ology, study of, or like the words and learning of this. Um, the I am so sorry. Where was I? I started getting caught on logos. Right, morphology. There we go. Shape. If you just look at the shape, and the different pieces of their body, their anatomy, there's a lot of different features of pangolins that really seem kind of just like anteaters. But they're closest relatives, as far as we now know, looking at more than just morphology, more than just shape, but also their genetics, and also certain physiological processes. They are most closely related to carnivora. So imagine that there's a split in that phylogenetic tree. Phylogenetic tree is a tree showing how different species are related. If you imagine that split there, if you went up to this branch, you'd go and see like felines and dogs, canids, so carnivores. But then if you go just branching off, you get to Phylodota, which is the order that contains pangolins. Here's what is so wild and just awesome. They are most closely related to carnivores, and yet they have no teeth. What even is that? What does that even mean? Isn't that just completely wild? When we think carnivore, teeth, claws, and jaws are such a part of what we think in terms of something being, carnivorous. And it's not that pangolins are carnivores, but it's just they're so close on the tree that it's amazing to think that close relatives, they actually don't even have teeth. Instead, they feed by using this incredibly long tongue, again, kind of like an anteater. And that tongue is able to get their favorite kinds of foods, which are mainly ants and termites, though it depends on the species as far as which of those that they prefer. And let's see. And Eric is making perfectly ridiculous analogies here. Yes, certainly. Though it is fair. Let's see. The very tips of their tails. That is so cool. So Katie is mentioning, as far as the like individual to individual, someone was asking if their scales were unique to the individual, and Katie is saying that they're saying that the very tips of them, so the tips of their tails. Okay, so the tips of their very long tails. Gotcha. Instead of scales. That is so cool. There is still so much we don't know about them, right? So incredible. Which is absolutely awesome. If you dig into the phylogeny, so the relatedness of any species, one of the things you start to come across, or maybe one of the questions you start asking, is kind of the when and the where. when did this species, at least the way that we kind of think of them in modern terms, when did this appear, and where did it likely come from? Pangolins, as of right now, exist in two different continents, in the African continent and the Asian continent. But fossil record, and to the best of our knowledge now, looks like their ancestor was actually from Eurasia, or more of, what was it called? Laurasia. I'm not great with geology, but old school kind of European area. And then with different earth processes over time, like glaciation and changes to where land was placed, they eventually then split and went down to both Africa and Asia. Yeah, tip of the tail. What a neat thing. One thing I learned, which is pretty cool, about their tails. So again, I would highly encourage you, if you haven't seen one, to look one up, even just like a quick Google image search. You'll see that they have these really long tails, and in some of the species, that tail can actually be like 2/3 of their whole body length. And so when you see them kind of like moving away, walking, looks kind of reptilian, like there's this long scaled tail kind of a thing. Oh, baby Jane, you're just so cute. I can't even deal with it. So just checking up in the chat. Yep. Still so much we don't know about them. Absolutely. So in prehensile too. Yeah, let's talk pangolin tail, since there's a couple comments about that right now. So in terms of what an animal or plant or fungus or anything, what it kind of looks like, and the shape has to do with the function. So in terms of being prehensile or used for climbing, that has to do probably with where they live. And it turns out that there are some species of pangolins that are actually arboreal. Arbor from Latin, meaning tree. So they actually will be up in trees. And so Katie's saying it right now like a fifth hand. So they're able to use that tail to hold their weight. Now it depends on the species though, because some species of pangolins prefer to be on the ground. So they're not arboreal. They are not living in trees. They are more so on the ground. So their entire weight being able to be held might be a little bit different. Though prehensile, being able to move and interact and have its own kind of a almost, musculoskeletal system in terms of control and usage, totally. And if you see some of them, you'll see that some of the tails are just so long. And let's see, playing equals attempting to eat. Right. Yes, playing with cats is what I like to call murder practice, TM. Cats are just very, very, very good murderers, all of them. Right, baby Jane? Yeah, exactly. The idea of like getting bored, it's just, well, guess what? Those scales are not just totally fabulous looking, which by the way, they absolutely are. They serve a purpose. They are used mostly for armor, to the best of our understanding, because a lion or another large predator that might live in these ranges where we find pangolins, they actually can't pierce those scales. They're hard enough to where they can't be pierced. And so like Katie's saying right here, predators at a certain point, it's like, you know what, nah, because they will roll up in a ball. And one of the reasons we have that really long tail on them, if you think of form and function, they're able to curl around on themselves and really make this kind of tight ball, again, likely for protection. Yes, awesome. So Katie's mentioning, just thinking about tails, right? That we have some that are that the way that the species uses that tail could be different for the arboreal ones than on the ground. So she's saying that some of the more land-based, so ground-based species will use it more for balance than climbing, as an anchor to help them dig. That's really cool. They're called fossorial, so like digging and burrowing. That's the kind of an animal that most pangolins are. They're able to dig, and you can see with their claws, they're really, really good at it. They can do that, or again, they can be arboreal, just kind of depends on the species. So Ned, yeah, we are totally going to talk about that. Ned is mentioning within the comment section about links between the COVID-19, that virus, and pangolins, which we'll absolutely get to because it actually is completely connected with the topic of this documentary. And the thing to keep in mind with any kind of diseases, especially ones that are exchanged, we say zoonotic diseases, so they go directly between non-human animals to humans, is that the conditions of certain populations, particularly in markets and at higher densities than we would typically get, are a great way for disease to become more prevalent. And things like SARS and some other common respiratory diseases that we've seen in humans have come from those increased densities within different marketplaces. So there's absolutely something there. And I'm going to, for the sake of kind of exploring first the trafficking and then getting into the current tie-in, we will come back to that. But I will absolutely touch on that because I did quite a bit of research to be able to chat about that a little bit. What's very important is the T-Rex comment because it is so cute. I kind of can't handle it. It is one of the cutest things I've ever seen. If you look up video again of pangolins walking some of the ground-based species, they'll do it on their back two legs and with their tail, since their tail is so long. Imagine a T-Rex with that kind of weight balance. It's stupid cute. Oh God, it's so cute. It is just way too cute. Thesis statement, stupid cute. They are just so cool. Number of species, it looks like about 8 right now. I think split 4 and 4 for the African and Asian groups, that phylogeny, so that relatedness tree. But you know, species lines can get moved around, absolutely, and so that's kind of the best to our knowledge right now. And one of the things to note as far as trafficking is with these 8 different species, when we talk about pangolins being the most trafficked mammal on Earth right now, it's because of, honestly, economics, so basic supply and demand principles. Pangolins are in demand from different cultures and countries of people around the world for different reasons. So they are used as just regular meat, so like bushmeat, so going out and sustenance, but largely the bigger issues are the use of pangolins for traditional medicine. So a lot of that taking place in China. Now there are no scientific claims to that working. So there's again, a lot of this is almost more like folklore and kind of spreading of disinformation, honestly, as far as something working to cure this or treat that. Pangolin scales for this or pangolin meat for that. It's really important to note that there is not any evidence that those things work. However, there is demand for it, and that means that supply has to happen. So, supply. Well, these 8 species of pangolins right now, guess what? All of them are listed on the IUCN Red List as either vulnerable, endangered, or critically endangered. I'm going to send you guys a brief link to the IUCN Red List page for just pangolin. And actually, all 8 are marked right now. Sorry, by marked I mean they are listed, so they have been assessed by the IUCN Red List. Yeah, exactly. Katie's mentioning keratin again. We also see that in rhino horns as well. So I mean, that's a really cool thing if you think about protection from something like a lion. Think about how hard something like a horn is, right? So I linked you guys to IUCN Red List, and you can see that none of these 8 species are non-threatened. They're all listed in threatened categories. But the ones in Asia are more highly threatened, so we have the more like critically endangered and endangered. Because of that, even though the supply is changing, that demand is still there. And so there has been a shift over from the Asian species to the African species. And that's what Katie's documentary and her team really looked at, is what's happening on the ground in Nigeria as they're dealing with all of the complicated and overlapping pieces of this kind of story, not only just supply and demand, but also the human stories within this as well. So people who potentially rely on this for food, though that's not totally, you know, the case for all usage. There's also people who rely on the trading of pangolin products because they are middlemen in this supply chain, and they depend on that money to be able to feed their family. So there's ways, it's not just direct eating, there's money, and there's also you know, there are benefits being within the supply chain, and it's people have potentially been in there their whole lives. And one thing that is really neat and a really good point in this documentary is that the trading and the hunting that's happening in Nigeria is not coming from a place of ill intent or of evil intentions. It's not people sitting and wanting to destroy things. It's hard because the reality versus the cultural notion, and you know, the reality of people needing to eat can be very complicated, and that same complication exists within the traditional Chinese medicine, these deeply held cultural beliefs. Because who am I to tell someone else that what they practice is, quote, wrong? There's not a right and wrong, except when you place something within a value framework. And if you value your traditional medicine and cultural practices more than you value another species, then what you are doing to you is right. It's completely relative. You know, which makes it incredibly difficult. I saw Katie was mentioning the shift that's happening with younger generations. This is absolutely a thing that's happening, and also happening with potentially with the tie-ins with COVID-19. So absolutely, you know, absolutely check out this short film. And Katie, feel free to put the link in the chat if you want to. You'll see a wonderful kind of snapshot of the complicated layers of this issue, of this international issue. And you'll also see footage of just some of the coolest mammals you'll ever see. But getting into some of, again, these questions, because I want to make sure that that you guys can get these questions answered, because many people on here and also online, etc., have been asking about this tie-in. And so I did a little bit of work. Keep in mind that the way that the information about this virus right now is coming and going is, I mean, just lightning speed. Scientists are doing their best to publish and get information out, but still taking time for that peer review process, which is so important. So it is really, really complicated, and things change. So really good to note that in a rapidly changing news and information situation like we're in right now, it's really good to keep an open mind and a critical eye to information as it comes in. So because of that, I kind of made a timeline, because for me, that's a really great way to kind of see how things are changing and how quickly. And where we can kind of start, especially as far as pangolins are concerned, and the tie into COVID-19, is a press conference that happened on February 7th, which I think was 14 years ago, or like 2 months. I kind of don't know anymore. Speaking of timelines, what a wild time to be alive. Yeah, so February 7th, so about, 2 or so months ago, there was a press conference where scientists came out and said, hey, guess what? We found that we looked at the sequence of the this virus in humans and also in pangolins, and we see a 99% similarity. Um, and yeah, at least 14 years ago. I'm sticking to it. Uh, so 99% similarity, and I said, "Oh my gosh, that's so high, that similarity in these viruses, because we've known that pangolins, much like we've known that bats, a lot of different species can carry coronaviruses, and it turns out just 2 weeks later, so on February 20th ish, that report that they had actually got published. And this is what I meant as far as things going really quickly and then tiny backlog to try to peer review or to try to actually publish is very, very difficult, because you want to talk about what you found, but you have to go through that rigorous process. Otherwise, science falls apart. So that 2 weeks later, they actually have it published, and they saw that if you look at the genome, so the entire set of genetic material, that the virus in pangolins and humans is only 90.3% similar. So that's a very different kind of a number, 90 versus 99. And so it kind of didn't matter at that point as far as the storytelling and the legislation went, because only a few days after that, around like what, February 24th, China announced a ban on trading and eating of a lot of different wild animals, and that included pangolins. Really great to note. You might be thinking, wait, these are endangered. How are they possibly not regulated, or why is that not banned? Well, spoiler alert, it is, and that's why this is illegally trafficked products. Pangolins, as of I believe 2016, so within the last 5 years, were listed on what's called CITES, CITES. Convention on International Trade of Endangered Species. It's an acronym. If one of those letters was incorrect, I apologize. Please correct me at any time in the chat. But what that is a almost imagine kind of like a watch list. So that is a list where that actually has legal ramifications. Pangolins were listed in Appendix 1, which is the highest level of protection, and it's saying, internationally, you cannot do this. This is illegal to do this for pangolins. You do not trade them, and just don't. So while China did come out in that later February and say, all right, we're doing a full ban, keep in mind, guess what? It was already banned, at least for pangolins, to some extent. And so just because a law is passed does not necessarily mean that that's what's actually happening on the ground, as I'm sure you've seen happen with all kinds of things. For example, like drinking in college before you're 21 in the United States. Yes, it is a law, but like you may have seen people not totally adhere to it. Granted, that, in my opinion, is totally not as bad as trafficking pangolins, but relative values, right? Totally relative. So that's what we're looking at around the end of February. And keep in mind that even if there is like a shift with pangolins from, okay, there's no more actual bodies, it's just the scales, it's just body pieces, or even like dried or preserved or even like crushed up pieces of scales, that's where it then gets tricky in a little bit of gray area. And that's where a lot then are being illegally shipped out of Nigeria, where you'll get to learn more about that if you check out the doc. So March 17th, so this is now a couple weeks later, approximately 13 years ago, we have another paper published in Nature Medicine. And what this one is finding is that the ultimate source, so of this SARS virus 2, it is bats. It's likely from bats, but humans are not necessarily interacting with bats so often that it would just jump immediately. And also there's some problems with the way that that jump happens. It's likely that there is an intermediate host, or at least something happening for it to be able to get from bats over to humans. What's really cool about this, if you're someone that's interested in like molecular biology or virology, or just kind of the tinier things in life, this is because in bats, the sequence of the genetic material, so the sequence or the gene that has a functional role, the thing that allows this virus in particular to bind within human cells, that sequence actually is not found in bats. So this is what I meant in terms of that jump between bats and humans. There's something missing because that sequence isn't quite there. So then there are two main theories or possibilities that this paper on March 17th laid out. They said, okay, here's number one. This is the first possibility is that somehow there was, evolution and mutation, there was change to the bat virus that eventually, in one way, before actually becoming like the pandemic and before becoming infectious, there was some kind of mutation that occurred within a human host that actually allowed that binding site or sequence to come to be. And then that got spread around, and then it had a way to move around. So that was option one. Option two is that, all right, sure, maybe it wasn't directly bats to human, but we have the intermediary. And this is where pangolins come in. So remember how that original miscommunication in February, turns out that the sequence of this coronavirus in pangolins is only about 90% similar to the human one. Well, it's important to look at where that 90% is, because we saw that the one in bats was way closer in terms of the total, but it was missing that really important binding sequence. And so the interesting thing is that it looks like pangolins actually do have that sequence of genetic information that codes for that binding, at least within human cells. And so even though it's not as similar on the whole, they do have that sequence in common. And then we have a week or so later, another study comes out and says, hey, we looked at some pangolins that were smuggled in China, and we found viruses that are absolutely similar to SARS-CoV-2 or the COVID-19 that we're seeing, and also has those binding sequences. And so what they kind of looked at is the possibility, again, those of you interested in virology might think this is pretty cool. It's possible that the bat and pangolin coronaviruses, like individually, may have even met up in the same host and done something called recombination, which is the swapping of genes, which is so cool. And yeah, right. So bacteria, viruses, just like the name of the game is swapping, because think about diversity. Even in the small scale, there's still this drive for diversity, for mixing it up. And so they'll do recombination. And so potentially you have inside the same host recombination of this genetic material that then leads to actually having the bat virus, but with a little copy paste of that pangolin sequence that contained the human cell binding sequence, which is, just absolutely mind blowing and so cool. But again, remember, we can't conclude this right now. And it looks like the last time they kind of saw something like this was SARS years ago. And even then, it took them years to figure out the intermediary. I believe it was something like civets. And then more recently, camels were an intermediary. So there's all kinds of ways that this can happen. So that's kind of where things are sitting right now, is that pangolins do have coronaviruses. Pangolin coronaviruses are similar to this one we're seeing right now. Pangolins have had this SARS-CoV-2 version, and the pangolin version absolutely does, it looks like, have that sequence that contains the information for the binding for human cells. But again, it will take a very long time to really conclusively say that yes, absolutely, pangolins, case closed. We would have done it if it weren't for those pesky recombination events, Scooby Doo episode ending, right? It's more nuanced and it's going to take more time to understand that. But here is the cool thing. Katie mentioned that there are changing attitudes and changing values within the Chinese population and within some of these cultures that overlap and range with pangolins and with many species in terms of kind of getting away from that idea of the traditional medicine and alternative medicine. There was a recent survey done on people living in China, and said it was like, I don't know, tens of thousands of people surveyed, if not like 100,000, and something close to like 90% of respondents said, you know what, I would support a total ban of trade in wild animals. I don't care what it's for. I would support it. And this is even without there being conclusive proof. So I remember when I saw some of the headlines about pangolins possibly being an intermediary, I was really worried that that would make people kind of vilify them, so make them into a villain and create negative feelings and these a negative value toward these species, in the same way that we have, for rats or even bats, right? These things that carry disease. But amazingly, this could, it's not that it will, but it could um, lead to potentially a change in the way that different species are used and traded and moved through large marketplaces. And that could be good news in the long run for species like pangolins, especially as those attitudes are changing with younger generations, etc. Chris, I agree. I could not vilify a pangolin if I tried. Seriously, don't get me started again. They're so cute. I just can't deal with it. One of my favorite shots, I was like, oh, I'm dying. Is the baby, the juvenile that the documentary got footage of, was just like too much, too much. Um, so anyway, that's a little bit about that. Remember, we're learning new things all the time. There could be something, new information that comes out in an hour that is something completely different. So let's all be critical thinkers and make sure that we kind of keep our mind open to those possibilities. Pango puffs. Oh, too much, too much. All right. So that's a little bit on those topics, generally about pangolins. And oh my gosh, Katie's giving some of the rabbit hole Google search recommendations here. Playing in mud. Oh, killer. The only thing cuter is Sweet Baby Jane. You are very right. Sweet Baby Jane, like, in the weirdest ecosystem that she's been a part of. Yeah, no, she the queen. She's the queen. Huh, baby girl? It's baby girl. Hi. Yes, I know. You would hang out with a baby pangolin. Yes, you would. Um, yeah, so Ned, thank you for asking that, and thank you for other people who have been asking about that. Again, the biggest thing is keep in mind the pros and cons anytime we get news about conservation or about non-human species. Is like, things can go two ways. They can go four ways, as far as the repercussions and what happens down the line. So while we still have a little bit of time, hopefully some of this has spurred some curiosity. So any kind of questions or thoughts about pangolins in general, about how cute they are, which they're just so cute. One of the questions I got from the wonderful Tamara was, "How are they so cute?" Which I don't know. Evolution, nature via nurture. They're just so cute. Um, and I've got a couple other questions. I'm happy to answer some things just about general biology, ecology, while waiting for some questions in the chat stream. So, in terms of size, um, let me. I see your question, quick, Chris. I'll get to there in just a moment, or perhaps Katie will hop in. With size, just so you know, the smallest one is the black-bellied pangolin, which is arboreal. That's one of those tree species. And I think I wrote it down in two different measurements, both metric and then our horrible system here. So smallest, they can get up to about 120 centimeters long. And then the giant ground pangolin, again, form and function. Smaller guys are up in trees, larger ones are down on the ground, up to 1.8 meters long. So that, and this includes the tail, that would be, I don't know, 5 feet or so, including that tail. Oh yeah, Kate. So they are related as far as both being mammals, but they are not, armadillos are not the closest relative. They're most closely related to carnivores, actually. Awesome. And so I think Katie is following up on the idea of reproduction in captivity. One of the most difficult species to breed in captivity. What generally is the reason? So stress easily and specific diet. Insectivorous, technically being carnivorous. Not. Yeah, it depends if you're talking colloquially or within like taxonomy. I think for people, if you said you were a vegetarian and you ate a ton of like worms and termites and stuff, people might be like, but are you? But in the split, not necessarily. And remember, they are not carnivores. They're not in the carnivora order. They are in their own, but the carnivores are their closest relation in that tree of life. And then, okay, so did pangolins go through a megafauna phase? Not that I know of. So those older fossils that they found that were before the more modern species were found both in Africa and Asia, the ones that were closer to Europe, I don't believe they were necessarily massive or much, much bigger. But it's absolutely possible that they were a little bit bigger. And I bet we could find how large those ancestors were. I found a newer textbook that came out on these guys. And right now I'm just looking up ancestral pangolin. And I don't see it immediately. I don't think they did the megafauna phase as far as what we might think of as megafauna, but again, it's all relative. If you're only this big and your ancestor was this big, you might consider that to be a megafauna phase, Here we go. So in terms of breeding, they aren't super clear on their gestation cycle. Maybe similar to humans, like 9 months to grow a baby. So pangolin moms are likely only having one pup every couple of years. Okay, yeah. So, I mean, one of the big take-home points about these species are just that we just don't know that much because they have trouble breeding in captivity, and because they are more solitary. So, besides mating and I think child rearing, I think they're typically solitary for like all 8. And so imagine they're just less likely to be seen, and that behavior just hasn't really been documented as much. And I think let me check Katie on gestation in this newer text. And I don't have the full copy. Gestation period, yeah, it's kind of varied. And so for the Sunda, here we go. Gestation periods reported for pangolins. So for the 8 different ones, the giant penguin says unknown. Philippine penguin says unknown. Varied reports, I think for the Chinese pangolin between 180 and 225 days. Oh, baby, Jane, what have you done? What have I done? The ecosystem is falling apart. Sorry, you okay? Oh my gosh, this very strange thing that someone's mom gave us fell, but I think it's okay now. Sorry, Jane. I'm so sorry. We need more data, totally. I agree. More data always, all of the data. But even then, you can learn everything about something and still not quite know some of the basics amazingly, because sometimes they're just things that we can't see or understand. But more is totally better when it comes to conservation. Yeah, I'm so sorry. I know that was loud. Sorry, guys. Jane is back to sleep. She's like, oh, please, if you think Brit doesn't make more noise than this every hour, then you are out of your mind. Let's see. Michael's asking about species distinctiveness and hybridization. To my knowledge, well, again, this is a little hard to get at, especially when there aren't huge breeding programs. I'm pretty sure they are distinct to where they don't have viable offspring, but not completely sure, especially as they are still reworking some of these species delineations. So it's possible that, in another like 2 years, they will, split one of the species right now into 2 subspecies, and then, hey, potentially those can reproduce. If nothing else, it's certainly not common. But hey, I'll do a search for hybrid while we're at it. I know, baby girl. Nope, they're talking about how people thought of them as a hybrid creature. Indeed. Indeed. Yeah, one of the longest tongues of any animal. And it's sticky. Yeah. Think about if you didn't have teeth, but you were still needing to get the kind of food that pangolins eat, those ants and termites. Yeah, really long. We're talking up to, I think in the largest species, like 40 centimeters. Let's see, I might have even, largest species up to 70 centimeters long. That is such a long tongue. That's so awesome. So awesome. Oh, and speaking of length, the black-bellied pangolin, the one that I was saying that's the smallest, and it's arboreal, looks like it has the most caudal vertebra. So those backbones, caudal meaning tail, caudal. It has the most caudal vertebra of any, I think, animal, maybe mammal or animal. But that was so cool to me. I had no idea. When you think of long tails, I mean, the first place I go is not that wild looking, a Pokemon. And yet there we go. It's like, it's just totally amazing. And those tails, remember, they can wrap up into those tiny balls for protection, and also can probably do some interesting locomotion with the ball form. Ball form, go! You can certainly roll and take advantage of gravity, certainly. Yeah, so really just absolutely fascinating kind of anatomical features, all for different purposes that form and function, anatomy and physiology, which is just one of the most wonderful ways to learn about evolution, is to look at the shape of something on life on Earth and then ask, what does it do? And a lot of the times those two things will go together, which is just incredible. Right, let's see. Laura's saying taxonomy is confusing to me. Why are pangolins by themselves and not grouped in with carnivores, but with different definitions? You could ask that question about basically any piece of taxonomy. Why didn't we draw the line here? And the most basic answer is the way that the tree is constructed with traits. So if you pick different traits to be those splits, you will have a different tree. Now, in general, taxonomy or the classification of species, honestly, it's made up, right? We made it up. Humans made it up. We grouped things the best that we could and we gave it names, and we're still doing that. Why do we do that? Well, because sorting things is a great way to learn more about them. Also, kind of organizing and thinking of relatedness can help understand processes. We also do it because of protection, conservation, things that happen at the species delineation level for protection. So there's reasons we do it, but keep in mind it is absolutely not some very concrete thing. You're absolutely right to feel confused about it, or for it to feel nebulous, because taxonomy and those splits absolutely are. Short answer is that there's something that carnivora have or don't have that pangolins either have or don't have in the opposite way. And yes, I love my cat too. Thank you. Oh man, they swim. Pango paddle. Nice. Nice, Chris. I like that. Oh, that is way too cool. So imagine, all right, hear us out. Imagine a T-Rex, but this big, mammalian, and swimming and cute. Huh? Anyone? Anyone? Yeah, they're awesome. They're so awesome. Um, and speaking of awesome, the reason why there are protections in place, and the reason why people on the ground in Nigeria and in Asia are doing what they're doing to work to protect these species is because people have found out that they are incredible, that they are so unique and so amazing and cute and just all of the above, right? And when you learn more about something, you can love it. And when we conserve things, we typically conserve what we love. So things like documentaries, things like looking at little clips on YouTube or pictures, things like learning where something lives, all of that can help us kind of foster that love of something, even if we are afraid of it, or if it's not cute, or if it's really different from us. We can still find that appreciation and love of a thing, and that can lead us to maybe our own values changing for the better, which again is relative. But people have and are falling in love with these species. It is an uphill battle, certainly, as far as bringing these numbers back. The intricate connection between them and potentially our own pandemic is fascinating and humbling, and certainly, might help pangolins in the long run. It might not. We will see. It's just kind of really amazing. Oh, I love that. Gotcha Katya saying just that you randomly did a project on blue whales and they're still one of your favorites. Yeah, we learn about things, and then we can find a love. And when we love things, we want to have them keep existing, right? So let's see. Do they have vocal cords? Yeah, I'm pretty sure all mammals do, but so no sound, but some well-trained hunters can listen and smell for them. Oh, the smell, that was an interesting thing. I think they have I think it's anal glands that release some kind of, I don't know if it's pheromonal or just scent or oils, that they have a distinctive smell. And hey Carrie, welcome. Got more of the IWFF team. Yeah, I wonder about, and Katie, I'm not sure if you know, as far as morphologically, if it's a lack of vocal cords or just lack of development, or if it's just behavioral. So like I imagine, so Kimosabe is a Quindu, a prehensile tail porcupine, that is taken care of and has a forever home at Animal Wonders, Montana here. And he makes some of the most absurd noises I've heard in my whole life. And if you look up, his species, those noises are not a thing that they're known for. and yet he does it as an individual. He makes these noises, so he can. It's just that maybe similarly to here, it's not part of their behavioral strategy, but maybe they still can, and I'm not sure. Maybe Discovery can do a pangolin week. Totally. Thanks, Lincoln. Thanks for being here. They can. Oh, guys, it's time to howl. Let's see if you can hear it. I got to howl. We in Missoula at 8 p.m. we howl for our essential workers. Ow! Pangolins are so awesome. Can you hear it? It's so awesome. Go Team Human. Baby Jane is not amused. Priorities. I'm sorry, Baby Jane. I know. We're obnoxious. I know. Yeah, you can hear it. Nice. Awesome. Yeah, it's a whole thing. We have fun here. Katie was mentioning the bit about formic acid and ants. How cool is that? So remember, the main food items for all 8 species of pangolins are ants or termites, and how much of each depends on the species. And so ants, when you get like bitten by an ant and there's that sting, that particular kind of acid is formic acid. And Katie's mentioning in here that they can actually smell the formic acid. That you can smell the formic acid that the ants, when they're eating, or that the ants are giving off. Fascinating. Yeah, Jane is like, you humans are weird, and she is not wrong. So that makes sense. I mean, the kinds of like hunting strategies and the kinds of ways that life on Earth communicates to each other, even from different species, chemical is one of the coolest ways, and something that humans don't necessarily do as much as other species, which is kind of cool. Yeah, that's interesting. So if your whole diet consisted of ants, and ants were characterized or able to be smelled out by a certain kind of compound, then it would probably make sense. I remember years ago reading that there had been a study about cats being able to taste ATP, like building blocks of energy and within cells, because they're obligate carnivores. I don't know where the science is on that. I haven't checked in on it recently, but I remember that being so cool. The idea of tasting, only having like taste receptors for the things that you actually eat. Color vision. Oh, okay. So Katie's saying hunters can smell the formic acid. Ah, I see. Gotcha. So from their diets, that's potentially part of the smell that people can sense on pangolins. Gotcha. Yeah, cool question, Tamar. Yeah. So I mean, we definitely do see generalized kind of splits. Like with birds, it's almost ubiquitous to my knowledge that they have the tetrachrome, the like 4-color 4-cone system for birds, and that there's a lot of similarities with mammals as well. Yeah, I don't know. Like pangolins are, again, still such a mystery that tomorrow I'll check in this textbook for you, which by the way is called Pangolins, Science, Society, and Conservation 2020, and I have like a preview access through the school's library. I'll look at vision real quick. Future vision for pangolins. The white-bellied pangolin has poor vision except in close proximity, but excellent olfactory senses. So excellent sense of smell. Yeah, well, one thing we can certainly say about excellent, Ned. Queen Jane does say hello indeed. Tomorrow I was saying 4 for birds, because they also can see into that ultraviolet spectrum. The vision. So if you just look at a pangolin, and you kind of just check out their general features, you'll see that their eyes are small. You know, if you compare them to say like like a sugar glider or some other nocturnal mammals with those huge eyes. Even though I think most of the species, I know that one of the species looks like it's diurnal, so more active during the day. Even though some are more active at night, they still don't have those massive big eyes that we think about when we think nocturnal. So that's kind of interesting. And it looks like the musk is an aphrodisiac to dogs. Oh my gosh, I don't even know where to start with that, but that is really cool and must have something to do with relatedness there, or some chemical signaling that we probably will never even understand, which is so awesome. Thanks, Kate. Thanks, Jim. Love you guys. Take care. Tamara, I don't know. Our eyes considered small. We, I feel like because we're pretty diurnal, like active during the day, the ratios make some sense. But we're an individual species, just like everything else. So I guess a little bit relative. That's just doing zoology, studying anything about life on Earth. The answer is just nah. It's relative. I think studying anything is like that. The more you learn about it, the more you understand that they're not just these perfect unifiers, but instead they're all these beautiful differences, which is pretty cool. All right, so the Howls told me this is the only way that Missoula, knows what time it is. We know it's 8 p.m. once a day. All the clocks have stopped working, and we rely on the howls of our brethren to let us know what time of day we have entered. Yes, 'twas the before time when we had clocks. I don't know what this character is, but there you go. Clocks still work. I'm being goofy. But that tells me it's 8 p.m., so we've been going for an hour, so I'm going to start to wrap things up. Katie's mentioning that the scent and the aphrodisiac and the connection with dogs is that it can be an issue because of attraction and then wanting to hunt them. Yep. Interesting. Certainly. So Scotch Queen is saying thought an African species. So one of those 4 African species is arboreal and nocturnal. Most likely. Let's see. I think the black-bellied is, I think, the most diurnal of them, but they might still be primarily nocturnal. I would need to check. Let's look for nocturnal. Anonymouse, I would think that's probable. Being able to smell the formic acid that ants produce. Certainly, if they're humans able to kind of pick up on that piece, even if it's after digestion or before digestion on its own, I bet pangolins would probably be wired for that, especially as it's such a big part of their diet. But I do not know. Species is nocturnal in warm mesic environments. So let's see who this is. This is Timix pangolin, predominantly nocturnal. And then we have, Timix pangolin. Oh my gosh, you guys, they're so cute. Why are they so cute? Checking out the other species as well. All right, here's this other one. The Sunda pangolin is principally nocturnal, though that one is not. That one is not one of the African species. Let's see. Likely one of them is both arboreal and nocturnal. I just don't know which of the 8 in that kind of lineup. Awesome. Thank you, Katie. So Katie's saying that the white-bellied pangolin is probably the most nocturnal and arboreal. And the idea of like the most, again, is because it's kind of within a spectrum. It's not just perfectly black and white. There's variation. Taste buds. Ooh, cool question. I don't know. Olfactory systems, and let's see. Taste bud is coming up with no results. Tongue papillae is another word or phrase for that. Did I mean tongue papillae? Yes, I did. The tongue also lacks papillae. Well, well, well. I don't know for which species, because again, this is like a preview. Um, but hey, at least one seems to lack taste buds. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. I know. I know. All right, so it looks like I'm going to sign off and get along to a couple other projects and things going on this week. But thank you guys so much for joining. Katie's letting us know a little bit about some of the coloration and differences. Yep, Temexan and giant pangolins are not arboreal; they're more the ground dwelling. And then there's more diurnal, the black bellied one. Darker scale coloration helps them with the hot sun. Totally possible. We know that dark coloration helps with thermoregulation, though there can be other reasons as well, certainly. Thank you everyone so much for joining. Penguin deep dive next. I love the idea of that. Penguins are so cool. So Carrie with IWFF is reminding you all that you can watch Katie's film, which is free until midnight Saturday night. If you want to check out the other extras or just contribute to the film festival in general. Again, those virtual passes, which are good for the rest of this week until the Saturday, minimum $5, and there's all kinds of awesome content. Thank you so much to Katie Schuler, part of the production team and director of this incredible short documentary on the efforts happening right now in Nigeria to conserve pangolins. Thank you guys all. Secret. All the films will be available till Saturday. Right. Exactly. So yes, thank you, Katie, for joining. Thank you, all of you, for joining. Keep being curious. Keep an open mind, a critical mind about life on Earth around us, and take some inspiration from the incredible adaptations we see in life on Earth. And I'll talk to you guys soon. And I'm gonna do that perfectly awkward sign off because I still somehow haven't mastered how to go not live. But that means that I'll just let you see sweet baby Jane. And that's what we're gonna do. Have a good night. It's a baby Jane. She's so cute. Hi. What are you doing? What are you doing? Hey, the baby girl. Yes. Yes. Goodbye.